The moment my boss announced that Jake Martinez would be promoted to senior software engineer over me, I felt my world shatter. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, countless late-night deployments, and being the only person who could fix their broken legacy code meant nothing. As the only black woman on a team of 15 engineers, I should have seen it coming. But when the company's entire system crashed 2 months later, and they came crawling back begging for my help, everything changed. Which country are you listening from? Tell us in the comments below. My name is Zara Thompson, and I've been in love with computers since I was 8 years old. Growing up in Oakland, California, I was the kid who spent her allowance on programming books instead of candy. While other girls my age were playing with dolls, I was teaching myself Python and dreaming of working for the big tech companies that seemed to rule the world from just across the bay. My childhood wasn't easy. My parents, both teachers in the Oakland Unified School District, worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. Dad taught high school mathematics during the day and tutored students in the evenings. Mom taught 3rd grade and ran an after-school program on weekends. Money was always tight, but they never let that stop them from nurturing my passion for technology. I remember the day everything changed for me. I was 8 years old, sitting in the corner of my mother's classroom after school, waiting for her to finish grading papers. There was an old computer in the corner that barely worked, but I managed to get it running. When the screen lit up with that command prompt cursor blinking at me, something clicked. It was like the machine was asking me a question, waiting for me to tell it what to do. "Baby girl," my mother said, watching me type random commands, "what are you doing over there?" "I'm talking to the computer, Mama," I said, not looking away from the screen. "And I think it's listening." From that moment on, I was obsessed. My parents didn't quite understand my fascination with technology, but they supported it anyway. My father would drive me to the library every Saturday so I could use their computers when ours at home was too slow. My mother would quiz me on coding concepts even though she didn't understand a word of what I was saying. "Baby girl," she would tell me as I practiced explaining algorithms to her, "I don't know what all those numbers and letters mean, but I can see the fire in your eyes when you talk about it. That's how I know you're meant for something special." Our neighborhood wasn't exactly Silicon Valley. Oakland in the early 2000s was struggling with underfunded schools, high crime rates, and limited opportunities for kids who looked like me. But I had my computer books, borrowed from the library, and read until the pages were worn thin. I taught myself HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and eventually Python. While my classmates were playing video games, I was trying to figure out how to build them. By middle school, I was fixing computers for neighbors to earn money for programming books. Mrs. Chin next door paid me $20 to remove viruses from her laptop. Mr. Rodriguez down the street hired me to set up his email account. Word spread quickly in our tight-knit community that little Zara Thompson could make technology work when it didn't want to cooperate. High school was when things really took off. I convinced my computer science teacher, Mr. Patterson, to let me work on independent projects instead of following the standard curriculum. While other students were learning basic HTML, I was building complex web applications with database backends. I created a digital gradebook system that Mr. Patterson still uses today, and a student portal that allowed kids to check their grades and assignments online. "Zara," Mr. Patterson told me during my senior year, "I've been teaching computer science for 15 years, and I've never seen natural talent like yours. You don't just understand code, you think in algorithms." By the time I graduated high school, I had already built 3 mobile apps and won 2 regional coding competitions. The app that got the most attention was called SafeWalk, a safety app for students that would alert emergency contacts if someone didn't reach their destination safely. It was inspired by the realities of living in a neighborhood where walking alone at night wasn't always safe. Stanford University offered me a full scholarship for computer science, and I felt like my dreams were finally coming true. The day I got that acceptance letter, I called my grandmother, my father's mother who had raised 6 children during the civil rights era while working as a seamstress. "Grandmama," I said, tears streaming down my face, "I got into Stanford." "Baby," she said, and I could hear the pride and emotion in her voice, "you're going places our family never dreamed of. But don't you forget where you came from. You climb that ladder and then you send it back down for the next person." College was challenging but exhilarating. I was one of only 12 black women in my computer science program out of nearly 300 students. The imposter syndrome hit hard during those first few months. I was surrounded by students who had attended elite prep schools, who had been coding since elementary school in well-funded computer labs, who spoke confidently about technologies I had never heard of. But I found my tribe among other students who shared my passion for technology and my understanding of what it meant to be different in these spaces. There was Priya, a brilliant Indian-American woman who was working on artificial intelligence for healthcare applications. Marcus, a black student from Detroit who was developing apps for financial literacy in underserved communities. And Elena, a Latina student from East LA who was passionate about using technology to bridge the digital divide. We studied together, coded together, and dreamed together about changing the world through innovation. Late nights in the computer lab became our sanctuary, where we could geek out about algorithms and data structures without feeling like we had to prove we belonged there. My professors quickly recognized my abilities, particularly Dr. Sarah Chin, who became my mentor and thesis advisor. Zara, she told me during my sophomore year, you have an intuitive understanding of system architecture that's rare even among graduate students. Have you considered focusing on infrastructure engineering? That conversation changed my academic trajectory. I dove deep into the world of distributed systems, cloud computing, and performance optimization. My senior project was a machine learning algorithm that could predict and prevent system failures in large-scale server infrastructures. It was revolutionary work that caught the attention of several tech companies. The algorithm I developed could analyze system performance patterns in real time and identify potential failure points before they caused outages. During my thesis defense, one of the professors called it the most practical and innovative project we've seen in years. The project attracted attention from major tech companies including Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and a smaller but rapidly growing company called Quantum Systems. When multiple companies started recruiting me, I felt like I was finally seeing the fruits of all those years of hard work and sacrifice. Quantum Systems stood out because of their mission and their approach. They specialized in enterprise solutions for mid-sized companies, helping them scale their infrastructure without the massive budgets of Fortune 500 corporations. During my interviews, they seemed genuinely excited about my background and the fresh perspective I would bring to their team. When Quantum Systems offered me a position as a software engineer straight out of college with a starting salary of $135,000, I felt like I was walking into the future I had always imagined. The salary was more than my parents made combined, and the work promised to be challenging and meaningful. My first day at Quantum Systems, I walked into their sleek downtown San Francisco office wearing my favorite navy blazer, the one my mother and I had picked out together during a rare shopping trip, and carrying a laptop bag filled with notebooks and the latest programming manuals. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, reading about the company culture, studying their technology stack, and practicing how I would introduce myself to my new teammates. The office was everything I had dreamed of: floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern workstations with multiple monitors, ergonomic chairs, a kitchen stocked with every kind of coffee and snack imaginable, and the constant hum of innovation in the air. The lobby had a living wall covered in plants, modern art installations, and a digital display showing real-time metrics from their client systems. My team leader, Michael Chin, was a 40-something white man with kind eyes and an easy smile. He had a Stanford computer science degree from 15 years earlier and an MBA from Wharton. During our first meeting in his corner office, he seemed genuinely excited about my background and the fresh perspective I would bring to the team. "Zara," he said, pulling up my portfolio on his computer, "your work on predictive algorithms is impressive. We've been struggling with system reliability issues for some of our larger clients, and I think your expertise could be exactly what we need to take our infrastructure game to the next level." He walked me through the team structure and the current projects. The engineering team was small but talented, working on enterprise software solutions for companies ranging from growing startups to established businesses looking to modernize their technology infrastructure. For the first few months, everything felt perfect. I threw myself into my work with the same intensity one had brought to my studies. I arrived at the office by 7:30 a.m., often staying until well past 8 p.m. I volunteered for the most challenging projects, the ones that made other engineers groan when they saw them assigned to their queue. My code was clean, efficient, and innovative. I built relationships with my colleagues and contributed ideas that improved our development processes. During my first week, I identified a performance bottleneck in our user authentication system that was causing login delays. The fix I implemented improved response times by 40% and saved the company approximately $50,000 annually in server costs. The team was small but tight-knit, and I felt like I was finally finding my professional family. There was Jake Martinez, a friendly guy from Texas who had graduated from UT Austin with a computer science degree the same year I graduated from Stanford. He was easygoing, well-liked by everyone, and had solid programming skills, though he seemed more interested in the business side of technology than the deep technical challenges that excited me. Sarah Kim was our brilliant front-end developer who could make any interface beautiful and intuitive. She had an art degree from UCLA and had taught herself programming, bringing a unique design perspective to our user experiences. We bonded over being two of the few women in the engineering department and often grabbed lunch together to decompress from the male-dominated team dynamics. David Wong was our database specialist who seemed to know every SQL query by heart and could optimize database performance like it was magic. He was quiet but incredibly knowledgeable, the kind of person who could solve complex data problems that left the rest of us scratching our heads. And then there was Marcus Johnson, another black engineer who had been with the company for 2 years and quickly became my mentor and closest friend at work. Marcus had grown up in Chicago, attended Northwestern University, and had faced many of the same challenges I was navigating as one of the few black professionals in our field. "This place is pretty good," Marcus told me during one of our coffee breaks about 6 weeks into my tenure. "Michael's fair, the work is interesting, and they seem to actually value talent over politics. Just keep your head down, do good work, and good things will happen." I believed him completely. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in a place where my race and gender were irrelevant, where only my skills and dedication mattered. The work was challenging and engaging, my teammates seemed to respect my contributions, and I was learning something new every day. But that illusion wouldn't last long. The first sign of trouble came during my 6-month performance review. Michael sat across from me in his office, my evaluation spread out on his desk between us. The office walls were lined with awards and certificates, and there was a photo of Michael with the company's CEO at some industry conference. "Overall, Zara, your technical skills are exceptional," he began, and I felt a surge of pride. "Your code quality is among the best on the team, your problem-solving abilities are really impressive, and you've made significant contributions to several major projects." I smiled, waiting for the "but" that I could sense coming from the way he was avoiding eye contact. However, there it was. "I've gotten some feedback that you can be a bit intense in meetings. Some team members feel like you're trying to take over discussions or that you're being overly critical of other people's ideas." My smile faded immediately. "Intense? Can you give me specific examples of what you mean by that?" Michael shifted uncomfortably in his leather chair. "Well, last week during the architecture review for the Morrison project, you questioned several of Jake's design decisions pretty thoroughly. Some people felt like you were being a bit aggressive in your critique. Because Jake's proposed architecture had potential security vulnerabilities that could have compromised client data," I said, my voice remaining calm despite the frustration building inside me. "I was doing my job by identifying those risks before we implemented a flawed system." Of course," Michael said quickly, raising his hands. "And you were absolutely right to raise those concerns. Your technical insights probably saved us from a major security incident. It's just, maybe consider the way you present your ideas. Try to be more collaborative in your approach." Collaborative. I had heard that word used to describe women in tech before, usually when they were being told to be less assertive, less confident, less threatening to their male colleagues. When men questioned designs aggressively, it was called thorough analysis or attention to detail. When women did the same thing, it was being difficult or not collaborative. "I understand," I said, though I didn't really understand at all. "Can you give me more specific feedback about how I can improve my communication style? Maybe try to phrase your concerns as questions rather than statements," Michael suggested. "Instead of saying this approach will cause security problems, you could say, have we considered the security implications of this approach?" It's more collegial. I nodded and took notes, but inside I was seething. The idea that I needed to water down my expertise and present my knowledge as uncertainty just to make my male colleagues feel comfortable was infuriating. But I was still new to corporate culture, and I trusted that Michael had my best interests at heart. The second incident happened 2 months later during a critical project deadline. Our team was working on a major update to our flagship product, a comprehensive business management platform used by over 500 companies. I had been assigned to work on the core infrastructure improvements, focusing on performance optimization and scalability enhancements. It was complex work that required deep knowledge of both our legacy systems and modern optimization techniques. The existing codebase was a mixture of technologies spanning nearly 8 years of development, with some components written in older frameworks that were no longer supported. Modernizing the infrastructure while maintaining backward compatibility was like performing surgery on a patient who couldn't be put under anesthesia. I had been working 18-hour days for 2 weeks straight, surviving on coffee and determination. I refactored thousands of lines of code, implemented performance improvements that would make our system 30% faster, and built comprehensive testing suites to ensure the changes wouldn't break existing functionality. The work was some of the best I had ever done, and I was proud of the elegant solutions I had developed for seemingly impossible technical challenges. The day before our presentation to the executive team, Michael called me into his office. He was wearing a pressed shirt and seemed nervous, fidgeting with a pen as he spoke. "Zara, I need to make a change to tomorrow's presentation," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "What kind of change?" I asked, immediately sensing that I wasn't going to like his answer. "I think it would be better if Jake presented your work to the executives." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my stomach drop and my face flush with a mixture of anger and disbelief. My work? But I'm the one who designed and implemented everything. I know every detail of these improvements, every line of code, every performance optimization. "I know, and your technical contributions are invaluable," Michael said, speaking faster as if he could rush through the uncomfortable conversation. "But Jake has more experience with executive presentations. He's better at explaining complex technical concepts to non-technical stakeholders in a way they can understand." "Have you ever seen me present to non-technical stakeholders?" I asked, my voice tight with controlled emotion. "Well, no, but..." "Then how do you know I'm not good at it? How can you make that assumption without giving me the opportunity to demonstrate my communication skills?" Michael sighed and rubbed his temples. "Zara, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. The decision has been made. Jake will handle the presentation, but everyone knows this is your work. You'll get full credit for the technical achievements." But we both knew that wasn't how corporate recognition worked. The person who presented the work was the one who got remembered by executives. The person whose name was on the presentation slides was the one who got promoted. That night, I sat in my small studio apartment in Oakland, staring at my laptop screen and watching Jake's name appear as the primary contributor on the presentation slides that showcased months of my work. The technical diagrams I had created, the performance metrics I had achieved, the innovative solutions I had developed to solve complex infrastructure problems, all of it was now attributed to someone else. I called Marcus, hoping for some perspective from someone who understood the unique challenges we faced as Black professionals in tech. Marcus lived in San Francisco and had been navigating corporate environments longer than I had. "Man, that's really rough," he said after I explained what had happened. "But you know how it is in these places. Sometimes we have to pick our battles. Your work speaks for itself, even if your name isn't on the presentation. The people who matter know who really did the work." "But what if it doesn't speak for itself?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly. "What if the executives only remember Jake's name? What if this becomes the pattern where I do the technical work and someone else gets the recognition?" "Don't think like that," Marcus said, though I could hear uncertainty in his voice. "Michael knows who really did the work. When promotion time comes around, he'll remember your contributions." I wanted to believe him, but doubt was already creeping into my mind like poison. I had grown up watching my parents work twice as hard as their white colleagues for half the recognition. I had seen brilliant Black women in my computer science program drop out of the major after being repeatedly overlooked or dismissed. I had promised myself that things would be different for me, that my talent would speak louder than any biases. The presentation the next day was a huge success. Jake delivered my technical explanations flawlessly. He had clearly studied my documentation extensively and practiced the presentation multiple times. The executives were impressed by the performance improvements and cost savings. The CEO himself congratulated Jake on the innovative approach to infrastructure optimization. Afterward, Jake was congratulated by everyone from senior management to the marketing team. I stood in the back of the conference room watching my colleagues praise Jake for work I had done, feeling invisible and increasingly angry. "Great work, Jake," I heard Michael tell him as the meeting dispersed. "This kind of innovation is exactly what we need more of around here. You really knocked it out of the park." Jake, to his credit, looked uncomfortable with the praise. He sought me out afterward and tried to acknowledge my contributions. "Zara, everyone knows this was really your work," he said quietly. "I just presented it." "But that's not how it looked to the executives," I replied. "They don't know me from anyone. All they saw was you explaining technical concepts they didn't understand." "I'll make sure to mention your contributions when I follow up with them," he offered. "Thanks," I said, but we both knew that follow-up corrections never carried the same weight as first impressions. But that was just the beginning of a pattern that would define the next year and a half of my career at Quantum Systems. Over the following months, the same dynamic repeated itself consistently. I would do the technical heavy lifting, developing innovative solutions to complex problems, and Jake would present the results to clients or executives. When clients had detailed questions about implementation specifics, I would be called into meetings to provide answers, but Jake would get credit for the overall project success. During team meetings, my suggestions were often overlooked or dismissed until Jake or another male colleague would present the same ideas 5 minutes later, at which point they would be enthusiastically adopted. I started keeping a notebook where I documented these instances, writing down the exact time and date when I proposed ideas that were later credited to others. When I tried to speak up about architectural decisions during design reviews, I was consistently told I was being difficult or not a team player. My direct, technically focused communication style was labeled as abrasive, while male colleagues who used identical language were praised for their analytical thinking and attention to detail. The most frustrating part was how subtle it all was. No one ever said anything overtly racist or sexist. There were no explicit statements about my abilities being questioned because of my race or gender. Instead, it was death by 1,000 paper cuts, small decisions and unconscious biases that added up to a systematic pattern of marginalization. Sarah Kim, the front-end developer, confided in me that she was experiencing similar treatment. "They always want me to focus on the user experience parts of projects," she told me during one of our lunch conversations. "But whenever I try to contribute to architecture discussions or suggest improvements to our development processes, I get told that's not my area of expertise." Even Marcus, who had been at the company longer and had more institutional credibility, was struggling with similar issues. "I've been doing principal engineer level work for over a year," he told me, "but when I ask about promotion they tell me I need to develop my leadership skills. Meanwhile, white guys with less experience are getting promoted to senior roles." The breaking point came when the senior software engineer position opened up. This was the promotion I had been working toward since my first day at the company. Senior software engineer was the next step on the path to technical leadership, and it came with a significant salary increase, equity options, and the respect that I desperately craved. More importantly, it would give me the authority to make architectural decisions and lead technical initiatives. I had all the qualifications and then some. My performance reviews, despite the criticisms about being intense, consistently rated my technical skills as exceptional. I had led 3 major projects that had saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars in infrastructure costs. I had mentored 2 junior developers who both credited me with accelerating their technical growth and understanding of complex systems. The mobile app optimization project I had led the previous quarter had improved user experience metrics by 60% and reduced server costs by $200,000 annually. The security audit I had conducted had identified 12 critical vulnerabilities that could have resulted in major data breaches. The database migration project I had architected had been completed 3 weeks ahead of schedule and $50,000 under budget. Jake, on the other hand, had solid technical skills but no experience leading major projects independently. His code was good but not innovative. He was well-liked and had strong presentation skills, but his technical depth couldn't match mine. His most significant technical contribution had been implementing a feature that I had designed the architecture for. When the interview process began, I felt cautiously optimistic. I prepared extensively, practicing answers to technical questions and developing a comprehensive presentation about my vision for the team's future. I researched industry best practices for infrastructure scaling, prepared case studies from my previous projects, and outlined a roadmap for improving our development processes. My interview went well. I demonstrated deep knowledge of our systems, presented innovative ideas for improving our development processes, and outlined plans for scaling our infrastructure to meet the growing demands of our client base. I discussed specific technical challenges I had solved and provided detailed examples of my leadership experience. The technical questions were challenging, but I answered them confidently and thoroughly. When asked about handling system failures, I walked through my experience debugging a critical production issue that had saved the company from a potential multi-day outage. When asked about team leadership, I described my mentorship of junior developers and my contributions to improving our code review processes. A week later, Michael called me into his office to deliver the news. I walked in expecting congratulations, my notebook ready to take notes about my new responsibilities and transition timeline. "Zara, I want to thank you for your interest in the senior software engineer position," he began, and immediately I knew what was coming. The formal tone, the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes, the uncomfortable tension in the room. "We've decided to promote Jake to the role." The words hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. I sat in my chair, feeling numb and hollow, as if someone had reached into my chest and removed something vital. The office suddenly felt too small, too warm, and I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. "Can you tell me why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake has shown strong leadership qualities and excellent communication skills, Michael said, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. The team responds well to his management style, and he has a good relationship with our clients. What about technical qualifications? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. You're both very technically competent, he said dismissively, as if my years of expertise and innovative solutions were equivalent to Jake's adequate coding skills. But leadership is about more than just technical skills. It's about being able to work with people, communicate effectively, and build consensus. Leadership that I've never been given the opportunity to demonstrate because you keep having Jake present my work to executives and clients, I said, my composure finally cracking. Zara, I understand you're disappointed, but... Disappointed? I stood up, my chair rolling backward and hitting the wall. Michael, I've done everything right. I've worked harder than anyone on this team. I've solved problems that no one else could solve. I've saved this company money and time and reputation. And you're telling me that none of that matters because Jake is more likable. That's not what I said, Michael replied, but his tone suggested that it was exactly what he meant. What do I need to do to get promoted here? I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay professional. Because apparently being the best engineer on the team isn't enough. Apparently saving the company hundreds of thousands of dollars isn't enough. Apparently working 60-hour weeks and solving every critical technical problem isn't enough. Michael was quiet for a long moment, staring at his desk and clearly wishing he was anywhere else. Maybe you should focus on developing your soft skills, he finally said. Soft skills. The coded language that women and minorities in tech knew all too well. Be more agreeable. Be less threatening. Smile more. Speak less. Make the men around you feel comfortable. Shrink yourself so others can feel bigger. I walked out of his office knowing that my time at Quantum Systems was coming to an end, one way or another. The weeks following Jake's promotion were the darkest of my professional life. Every day felt like a struggle just to maintain my composure and continue doing my job while watching Jake struggle with responsibilities that I could have handled easily. Jake was a good person and a decent engineer, but he was completely unprepared for the technical leadership role he had been thrust into. During architecture review meetings, he would defer to me for technical decisions, essentially using me as his unofficial technical advisor while taking credit for the outcomes. He made decisions that I knew would cause problems down the road, but when I tried to offer guidance, I was told I needed to support the team hierarchy. Our team's productivity decreased noticeably as Jake tried to learn management skills on the job. Project timelines stretched longer as he struggled to understand the technical complexity of the systems he was now responsible for overseeing. Code reviews took longer because Jake needed me to explain technical concepts before he could approve changes. But the most painful part was the isolation. My relationship with my teammates became increasingly strained as they navigated the awkward dynamic of knowing I should have been promoted while trying to support Jake in his new role. Some colleagues avoided me entirely, as if my disappointment and frustration were contagious. Sarah Kim tried to be supportive, but she was dealing with her own career frustrations. I've been eligible for senior developer status for 8 months, she told me during one of our lunch conversations. Every time I ask about it, they tell me to be patient and focus on expanding my skill set. Meanwhile, guys with less experience are getting promoted left and right. Marcus, my former mentor, tried to encourage me to move on and not dwell on the past. During one particularly frustrating conversation, he pulled me aside and said, "Zara, you're young and talented. There will be other opportunities. Don't let this one setback define your career." When? I asked him. When will there be other opportunities for someone like me? Because it seems like every time I'm qualified for something, there's always a reason why someone else is a better fit. He didn't have an answer for that. I began applying for jobs at other companies, but the process was demoralizing. During interviews, I would be asked about my experience with leadership and project management, but I had to explain that most of my leadership experience had been behind the scenes, supporting other people's presentations and implementations. "It sounds like you've been doing excellent technical work," one interviewer at a startup told me, "but we're really looking for someone with more visible leadership experience. Have you led any teams or managed any major projects from start to finish?" How could I explain that I had done exactly that, but the recognition had been given to someone else? How could I get visible leadership experience when I kept being passed over for leadership opportunities? The rejection started piling up. Great technical skills but lacks leadership experience. Impressive coding abilities, but needs more client-facing experience. Strong technical background, but we're looking for someone with more presentation skills. It was a catch-22. I couldn't get promoted because I lacked visible leadership experience, but I couldn't get visible leadership experience because I kept being passed over for promotion. Meanwhile, at Quantum Systems, our infrastructure was beginning to show signs of serious strain. The company had grown rapidly over the past year, adding new clients and expanding our service offerings. Our systems, which had been designed for a smaller scale, were struggling to handle the increased load. There were intermittent outages that lasted minutes at a time. Performance issues that made our applications sluggish during peak usage. Growing complaints from clients about system reliability and response times. Our uptime metrics, which had been consistently above 99%, dropped to 96% and kept declining. Jake, overwhelmed by his new responsibilities and the pressure of managing a struggling infrastructure, assigned the problems to David Wong, our database specialist. But David's expertise was in data management and optimization, not system architecture and infrastructure scaling. He could optimize queries and improve database performance, but he couldn't address the fundamental architectural limitations that were causing our scalability problems. The problems persisted and began to escalate. Client complaints became more frequent and more serious. During one particularly bad week, we had 3 separate outages that lasted over an hour each. One of our largest clients threatened to terminate their contract if we couldn't guarantee better reliability. During one particularly frustrating team meeting, David turned to me in desperation. His usually calm demeanor was cracking under the pressure of trying to solve problems outside his area of expertise. "Zara, you worked on infrastructure optimization during the Morrison project, right? Do you have any ideas about what might be causing these performance issues?" I looked around the room at my teammates, all of whom were staring at me expectantly. Jake looked especially uncomfortable, knowing that this was exactly the kind of problem I was uniquely qualified to solve, but also knowing that asking for my help would essentially admit that he was in over his head. "I'd need to do a full analysis of our current architecture," I said carefully, trying to remain professional despite my frustration. "But based on what you're describing, it sounds like we might be hitting some scalability limits in our core systems. The symptoms suggest we have bottlenecks in our data processing pipeline and possibly some memory management issues in our application servers. Could you take a look?" David asked. "Just informally to see if you can identify any obvious problems?" I glanced at Jake, who was supposed to be managing the team's priorities and making technical decisions. He nodded reluctantly, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but also desperate for a solution. "Sure," I said. "I can spend some time this week analyzing our system performance and see what I can find." Over the next few days, I dove deep into our system architecture, analyzing performance metrics, reviewing server logs and identifying bottlenecks in our data processing pipeline. What I found was worse than I had expected. Our rapid growth had exposed fundamental flaws in our infrastructure design. Flaws that would only get worse as we continued to scale. The architecture that had worked fine for 100 clients was falling apart under the load of 500 clients, and we were already at capacity. Without major changes, we would soon be facing daily outages and potentially losing data. The database design had scaling limitations that were causing exponential performance degradation as data volume increased. Our caching layer was inefficient and actually making some performance problems worse. The application servers were running into memory limits during peak usage periods. Our monitoring systems weren't sophisticated enough to identify problems before they caused outages. I prepared a comprehensive analysis documenting the problems and outlining potential solutions. It was complex work that required deep understanding of both our legacy systems and modern cloud architectures. I estimated that fixing the issues would require a complete overhaul of our infrastructure. A months-long project that would need careful planning and expert execution. The document I prepared was 30 pages long and included detailed technical analysis, cost projections, timeline estimates, and risk assessments. I outlined a phased implementation approach that would minimize disruption to our current operations while systematically addressing each infrastructure limitation. When I presented my findings to the team during our weekly architecture meeting, the room fell silent. Even Jake, who usually tried to maintain an optimistic demeanor, looked pale as I walked through the severity of our technical debt. "How bad is it?" Michael asked, leaning forward in his chair. "Bad," I said honestly. "If we don't address these issues soon, we're looking at increasingly frequent outages, potential data loss, and angry clients jumping ship to our competitors. We're essentially at a fork in the road. We can either invest in fixing our infrastructure properly, or we can continue applying band-aid solutions until the whole system collapses." "What would it take to fix it?" Jake asked, and I could hear the anxiety in his voice. A complete infrastructure redesign, I said. New cloud architecture, database optimization, data migration, performance monitoring, security improvements, and automated scaling systems. We're talking about touching every part of our system and rebuilding our infrastructure from the ground up. How long would that take? Michael asked. With the right team and proper planning? 6 to 8 months. Maybe longer if we run into unexpected complications or if we try to maintain full system availability during the transition. The room was quiet as everyone absorbed the magnitude of the challenge. This wasn't a simple bug fix or a performance optimization. This was a complete overhaul of our core technology infrastructure. Who would lead something like that? Sarah asked. Everyone looked at Jake, who had gone completely pale. We all knew he didn't have the experience or expertise to manage a project of this complexity. This was exactly the kind of technical leadership challenge that required deep infrastructure knowledge, project management skills, and the ability to coordinate multiple teams across several months. I would need to think about the best approach, Jake said weakly. Maybe we could hire some consultants to help with the planning. That's when I realized that this might be my opportunity, not just to solve our technical problems, but to finally demonstrate the leadership capabilities that had been overlooked for so long. But I also realized that I was tired of begging for opportunities that should have been offered to me in the first place. That evening, I sat in my apartment looking out at the San Francisco Bay, thinking about my conversation with my grandmother from years earlier. You climb that ladder and then you send it back down for the next person. I had been trying to climb their ladder, following their rules, hoping that if I worked hard enough and proved myself thoroughly enough, they would eventually recognize my value. But maybe it was time to build my own ladder. That weekend, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of volunteering to lead the infrastructure project under the same system that had been marginalizing me, I decided to take complete control of my own narrative. That weekend, I spent 18 hours writing the most comprehensive technical proposal of my career. The document was 50 pages long and detailed every aspect of our infrastructure problems, along with a complete solution architecture that would not only fix our current issues but position the company for massive growth over the next 5 years. I included timeline estimates, resource requirements, risk assessments, cost-benefit analyses, and detailed technical specifications for every component of the new system. I outlined a phased implementation approach that would minimize disruption to our current operations while systematically addressing each technical debt issue. Phase 1 would focus on immediate stability improvements and monitoring systems. Phase 2 would implement the new database architecture and caching layer. Phase 3 would migrate to cloud-based infrastructure with automated scaling. Phase 4 would implement advanced security measures and performance optimization. But most importantly, I documented everything that had led to this crisis. Every time my recommendations had been ignored, every architectural decision I had warned against, every performance optimization I had suggested that had been deprioritized in favor of new features. I had been keeping detailed notes for months, and now I had a paper trail that told a very clear story. The infrastructure problems we were facing were entirely predictable and could have been prevented if my expertise had been properly valued and my recommendations had been implemented when I first proposed them. The evidence was damning. 6 months ago, I had written a memo warning about scalability limitations in our database design. 8 months ago, I had proposed implementing better monitoring systems to identify performance issues before they affected customers. A year ago, I had suggested migrating to cloud infrastructure to improve reliability and scalability. Each recommendation had been dismissed as premature optimization or not a current priority. Now we were facing exactly the problems I had predicted, but the cost of fixing them had increased exponentially because we had waited until they became critical. On Monday morning, I requested a meeting with Michael and submitted my proposal. But I didn't just send it to him, I also sent copies to the CTO, the VP of Engineering, and the CEO. I wanted to make sure that the people who made real decisions at the company understood the full scope of our technical challenges and the expertise required to solve them. This is incredibly thorough, Michael said as he flipped through the document in his office. You've really thought through every aspect of this project. This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need more of. I've been thinking about these problems for over a year, I replied calmly. I tried to raise these concerns multiple times, but they were always deprioritized in favor of new feature development. Michael looked uncomfortable. Well, the important thing is that we address them now. I think Jake could really benefit from your technical guidance on this project. You two could work together to implement these improvements. Actually, Michael, I have a different proposal. I pulled out a second document, My resignation letter, typed on professional letterhead and dated that morning. "I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice," I said calmly, sliding the letter across his desk. "But I'm also proposing to take on this infrastructure project as an independent consultant." Michael's eyes widened and he nearly dropped the resignation letter. "Zara, you don't need to resign. We can work something out. If you're unhappy with your current role, we can discuss adjustments." "Can we?" I interrupted, my voice remaining steady and professional. "Because my experience here suggests otherwise. I've consistently been passed over for leadership opportunities despite having the strongest technical qualifications on the team. My work has been attributed to other people, my recommendations have been ignored until they became critical problems, and my career growth has been systematically stalled." I slid a third document across his desk, a detailed consulting proposal. "This infrastructure overhaul is going to cost the company at least $2 million if you hire an outside firm to do it," I continued. "I'm offering to do it for half that cost with a timeline that's 30% faster than any external vendor could manage, because I already understand our systems intimately." Michael was speechless, clearly not having expected this turn of events. He picked up the consulting proposal and began reading through it, his expression growing more surprised with each page. "There's one more thing," I said, standing up from my chair and smoothing down my blazer. "I've also documented every instance over the past 2 years where qualified women and minorities have been passed over for promotions in favor of less qualified white men. Not just me, Sarah Kim has been eligible for senior developer status for 8 months. Marcus Johnson has been doing principal engineer work without the title or compensation for over a year." Michael's face had gone completely pale. "Zara, I don't think—" "I'm not threatening anyone," I continued, my voice remaining calm but firm. "I'm simply stating facts that are well documented in performance reviews, project outcomes and promotion decisions. This company has a pattern of not recognizing the contributions of its diverse talent. And that pattern is about to cost you your most knowledgeable infrastructure engineer at the exact moment when you need that expertise most." I picked up my laptop bag and headed for the door, feeling more confident and powerful than I had in months. "The consulting proposal is valid for 48 hours, I said over my shoulder. "After that, you'll need to find someone else to solve your infrastructure crisis. And based on the complexity of the problems and the specialized knowledge required, I estimate that will take you at least 6 months and cost you significantly more money." That afternoon, my phone started ringing. The first call was from the CTO, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a woman in her 50s who had built her reputation by turning around failing technical organizations at 3 different companies. She had an MIT computer science PhD and a reputation for being brilliant, demanding, and completely intolerant of discrimination. "Zara, I just finished reading your proposal," she said without preamble. "Can you be in my office in an hour?" Dr. Walsh's office was on the executive floor, a place I had never been despite working at the company for 2 years. The elevator ride up felt surreal, like I was finally being invited to the level where real decisions were made. She was sitting behind her desk when I arrived, my infrastructure proposal open on her computer screen alongside what appeared to be several spreadsheets and documents. The office was impressive but not ostentatious, filled with technical books, awards from industry organizations and photos of Dr. Walsh speaking at conferences around the world. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "I have some questions for you." For the next hour, she grilled me on every aspect of my technical analysis. She challenged my assumptions, questioned my timeline estimates, and pressed me on implementation details. It was the most thorough technical interview I had ever experienced, more rigorous than my original job interview or even my Stanford thesis defense. She asked about specific technologies I had recommended, alternative approaches I had considered, and potential risks I might have overlooked. She wanted to understand my thinking process, not just my conclusions. Finally, she leaned back in her chair and studied me carefully. "Your analysis is brilliant," she said. "And your proposed solution is exactly what we need. The technical approach is sound, the timeline is realistic, and the cost projections are accurate. But I'm more interested in this." She pulled up the second part of my document, the section detailing the company's diversity and promotion practices. "You've documented some serious problems here," she continued. "Problems that go beyond just technical issues." "Yes, ma'am," I said. "I have." "How long have you been tracking this data?" 2 years, I replied. "Since I started here. I initially started documenting things because I wanted to understand the promotion process and identify areas where I could improve. But over time I realized the patterns I was seeing weren't about individual performance, they were systemic. Dr. Walsh was quiet for a moment, studying something on her computer screen. Zara, I'm going to be honest with you. I've been watching our diversity metrics since I joined this company 8 months ago, and they're terrible. We've lost 6 talented engineers from underrepresented groups in the past 18 months, and our promotion rates for women and minorities are significantly lower than for white men with equivalent qualifications. She turned her monitor toward me, showing a spreadsheet with promotion data broken down by demographics. The numbers were stark. White men were promoted at nearly twice the rate of women and minorities, despite similar performance ratings and technical contributions. I've been building a case for major changes in our engineering leadership, she continued. Your documentation provides exactly the kind of evidence I need to make those changes stick. What kind of changes? I asked. The kind that start with accepting your consulting proposal and end with you coming back as a director of infrastructure engineering. I felt my heart skip a beat. Director? You'd be reporting directly to me with full authority over infrastructure decisions and a team of 6 engineers. Your first project would be the infrastructure overhaul you've proposed, with full executive support and unlimited budget. Your second project would be helping me implement systemic changes to our promotion and review processes. I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. Director was 2 levels above senior software engineer, the position I had been denied. It was a role that typically required 5 to 7 years of experience, and I had been at the company for less than 3 years. There's one condition, Dr. Walsh continued. I need you to help me fix our broader diversity and promotion problems. Not as additional work, but as part of your role. I want you to help me identify and develop other underrepresented talent in our organization. What about Michael? What about Jake? Michael will be transitioning to a different role where his management style might be a better fit, she said diplomatically. And Jake will have the opportunity to develop his technical skills under new leadership, potentially under your mentorship. That evening I called my parents to tell them what had happened. I sat on my balcony overlooking the bay, still processing the surreal events of the day. Baby girl, my mother said, and I could hear the pride and emotion in her voice, you didn't just get promoted. You promoted yourself. My father, who had been listening on speakerphone, added, you showed them that respect isn't something you ask for. It's something you command. But the call that meant the most was to my grandmother. Grandmama, I said, remember when you told me to climb the ladder and send it back down for the next person? I remember, baby, she said. I think I'm finally understanding what you meant. I didn't just climb their ladder. I built a better one. I accepted Dr. Walsh's offer, and my transition from resigned employee to director of infrastructure engineering was announced the following week. The company-wide email explaining the change was carefully worded, but the message was clear. Quantum Systems was making major changes to address systemic problems in its technical leadership. The announcement sent shockwaves through the engineering department. Some colleagues were genuinely happy for me and excited about the changes. Others seemed confused or resentful about my rapid promotion. A few people avoided me entirely as if my success somehow threatened their own positions. My first day in my new role, I walked into the corner office that had previously belonged to Michael. The same office where I had been told I needed to work on my soft skills. But now I was there as the decision maker, with the authority to make the technical decisions I had been advocating for all along. The infrastructure overhaul project became the most successful technical initiative in Quantum Systems history. Working with a hand-picked team of 6 engineers, including Sarah Kim, who I immediately promoted to senior front-end engineer, we completely redesigned our architecture over 8 months. We implemented state-of-the-art cloud infrastructure with automated scaling, rebuilt our database systems for optimal performance, created comprehensive monitoring and alerting systems, and improved system performance by 400%. The project came in under budget and ahead of schedule, and our system reliability improved from 94% uptime to 99.9%. But the technical success was only part of the story. Working closely with Dr. Walsh, I implemented new promotion and review processes that focused on objective technical contributions rather than subjective assessments of cultural fit or soft skills. We established mentorship programs pairing senior engineers with junior developers from underrepresented groups. We created transparent career progression paths with clear technical milestones and eliminated the ambiguous leadership potential criteria that had been used to exclude qualified candidates. We also implemented blind code reviews and technical assessments to reduce unconscious bias in evaluation processes. We required diverse interview panels for all technical positions and established clear criteria for promotion decisions that had to be documented and reviewed. Within a year, our diversity metrics had completely transformed. We promoted 3 women to senior engineering roles, including Sarah Kim, who became our new front-end architecture lead. Marcus Johnson finally received his overdue promotion to principal engineer and began leading our machine learning initiatives. 2 other engineers from underrepresented groups were promoted to senior positions based on their technical contributions. Jake, to his credit, embraced the new structure and focused on developing his technical skills. Under the mentorship program I had established, he improved significantly as an engineer and eventually found his niche in developer relations, where his communication skills were genuinely valuable and his technical knowledge was sufficient for the role. Michael was reassigned to business development, where his relationship-building skills were better utilized and he didn't have direct reports to manage. The most satisfying moment came during my first annual review in my new role. Dr. Walsh and I sat in her office, discussing the past year's achievements. "Your infrastructure work has been exceptional," she said, "but I'm even more impressed by the cultural changes you've helped implement. Our retention rates for underrepresented engineers have improved by 300%, and our promotion rates are now equitable across all demographic groups." "It wasn't that hard to fix," I replied. "The talent was always here. We just needed to create systems that recognized and developed it properly instead of relying on subjective judgments and informal networks." "What's next for you?" she asked. I smiled, thinking about the conversation I'd had with a group of computer science students at UC Berkeley the week before. 23 young women and students of color had attended my talk about careers in tech, and their eyes had been filled with the same hunger and passion I remembered feeling at their age. "I want to make sure that the next generation of engineers doesn't face the barriers I faced," I said. "I want to build systems so good that talent is the only thing that matters." 6 months later, I received an email that made my heart swell with pride. It was from one of the UC Berkeley students who had attended my talk, a young Latina woman named Carmen Rodriguez. "Miss Thompson," she wrote, "I just accepted an internship at Quantum Systems. When I spoke to the recruiter, she told me that the company has been completely transformed by your leadership. I wanted to thank you for showing me that someone like me can not only succeed in tech, but can change the entire industry. You didn't just break through the ceiling, you rebuilt the whole building." That evening, I called my grandmother to share the email with her. "Grandmama," I said, "I think I'm finally understanding what you meant about sending the ladder back down." "What's that, baby?" she asked. "You don't just send the ladder back down. You build an elevator so everyone can rise together." She laughed, that warm laugh that had comforted me through every challenge in my life. "Now you're thinking like a real engineer," she said. Looking back on my journey from overlooked engineer to director, I realized that the most important lesson I learned wasn't about coding or system architecture or project management. It was about the power of documentation, preparation, and strategic thinking combined with the courage to bet on yourself when nobody else will. They thought they could sideline me by giving my presentations to someone else. But every time they did, I was learning their weaknesses, understanding their blind spots, and preparing for the moment when they would need expertise they had taken for granted. They thought that passing me over for promotion would make me disappear quietly. Instead, it made me document everything, analyze everything, and build an irrefutable case not just for my own advancement, but for systemic change that would benefit everyone who came after me. The truth is, discrimination in the workplace doesn't disappear because we ignore it or hope it will get better. It disappears when we make it too expensive and too risky for organizations to continue those practices. When we force them to choose between their biases and their bottom line. When I resigned and offered to solve their crisis as a consultant, I wasn't just solving a technical problem. I was demonstrating that their discriminatory practices had real business consequences. They had systematically undervalued and marginalized their most talented engineers, and now they were facing the cost of that decision. But the real victory wasn't my promotion or my salary increase or even the infrastructure project's success. The real victory was creating a system where the next generation of engineers who look like me won't have to fight the same battles I fought. Every time a young woman or person of color gets promoted based on their technical merits rather than their ability to make others comfortable, that's a victory. Every time someone's contributions are recognized and rewarded appropriately, that's progress. Every time talent is valued over politics, we move closer to the meritocracy that tech companies claim to be. I learned that you don't overcome workplace discrimination by being twice as good and hoping people notice. You overcome it by being so indispensably excellent that ignoring you becomes impossible, and then using that position to change the systems that allowed discrimination to flourish in the first place. They thought they were judging me by my appearance, my gender, my background. But in the end, I showed them the power of preparation, the strength of documentation, and the unstoppable force of someone who refuses to accept less than they deserve. The little girl from Oakland who fell in love with computers at 8 years old didn't just want to write code. She wanted to change the world. And sometimes, changing the world starts with changing the room you're in, the company you work for, the systems that determine who gets opportunities and who gets overlooked. Now, when I walk into any meeting, any presentation, any technical discussion, I don't walk in hoping to be accepted. I walk in knowing that I belong there, carrying the dreams of everyone who couldn't make it this far, and building systems that will lift up everyone who comes next. That's not just my story. That's the story of anyone who has ever been underestimated because of who they are rather than what they can do. We don't just survive their limitations. We architect solutions that make those limitations obsolete. And that transformation, from invisible to indispensable, that's how we debug the system and write a better future for everyone.